So
There's
we
so
can,
much to talk about on this Aliyah.
yeah, there really is. I mean, it's re-giving, kind of re-giving of the commandments and reestablishing those to a new generation. But it also enters into a lot more of the gear and the people who are with you and around you and associated with you, and their interaction within it. Now, where it wasn't so much at Sinai, talking about these, this deal. Now it's giving so much more instruction. Even your animals are to rest. Even even the gear that's in your gate, even your servants are going to rest. They're all going to be connected to this commandment through
Right.
you, through the Jewish people and their
Yeah.
servants. That we through their inheritance, and they're very guarded on the Shabbat, which is justifiable, but but there is, to me, James, as I'm going through what you read, there is that we have a direct connection to that commandment through them, not being them, not doing it because we are them, or being them or taking it away from them, but we are still connected to it. Am I the only one that sees anything like that?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of we've studied this throughout the years of the Gerha Asher Besharecha, your ger. This is usually generally halakhically referring to the Sachir or the hired servant or the servant, the Eved. But he's at the level, the Madrega of Ger Toshav. And for instance, in here, let me get the book here. But in for instance, the Mishnah Berurah. Okay. The Mishnah Berurah here. This is by the Chafetz Chaim, his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, and he talks about uh this is not a Jew. This is a Eino Yehudi Gamor. This is not a complete Jew. This is a Sahir. This is a hired worker. And he goes on and he talks about this. And this is from Hilchot Shabbos in 304. Um, and he the Hebrew, I'm not fluent in this form of Hebrew. So I'm not going to be able to just read it to you real quick. But this is basically a Ger Toshav. It's a Sachir Ger Toshav. And for himself, and the Rebbe talks about this in in Likutei Sichos, Parshas Mishpatim, and we've studied this years and years ago. And this Ger Toshav is on a different category than like a Stam Goy or a Ben Noach even. Uh, so he can keep Shabbos for himself like a Ger Toshav. Like and he keeps it like a Hol HaMoed. He cannot do work for his Jewish master. Now, this does not mean that all Ger Toshavs are Avadim of Jews or some such. We're talking about a Ger Toshav who has given himself over to do work or has enslaved himself to a master. Uh, but the point is, he rests on Shabbat. What does this say about the free man, the free Ger Toshav? Well, that's what I believe, if I remember correctly, what the Chafetz Chaim in his Mishnah Berurah, the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch and the laws of Shabbos, is talking about. And he can take on Shabbat, and I believe he even says in the Biur, the commentary on it, that he can take on even more mitzvahs if he wants. Um, The other thing I want to talk about is very important is the three cities. Okay. Stam b'nei Noach, plain b'nei Noach are loosed from being mitzuve, being commanded in the seven. We know this from the tractate of Avodah Zarah. B'nai Noach, because Hashem saw that B'nai Noach were not doing the mitzvahs, he loosed them from being considered mitzvah, being commanded. So B'nai Noach, and then the Ritva, which we talked about, or I've talked about before, the Ritva describes B'nai Noach in a similar manner. They are Eino mitzvah va'ose. They're not commanded, but they do. They're commanded, but they're not commanded, but does. That's called a Ben Noach. In other words, they are loosed from the mitzvahs. They're loosed from the Torah. B'nai Noach are not, they are not shaykh or connected directly to Torah. They do not accept the Torah. A ger toshav is someone who is mitzuveh va'oseh. And the Ritva talks about this as well. When Har Sinai came down, the whole program of B'nai Noach was done away with, and Hashem loosed them from being commanded. If you want to be recommanded in the Torah, you have to accept the seven. If you're not Jewish, you have to accept the seven because the Torah says so, and that is called Ger Toshav. And the Ritva, in his commentary on Makos 9a, which is talking about these three cities, what is the difference between different types of non-Jews and Jews in relationship to a manslaughter? So a fellow kills his fellow accidentally. And this is what it's talking about here. For a Ben Noach, and you guys all know these laws of B'nai Noach, and it's harsh, which is what? If you commit manslaughter, if you're on your drive home from work and a homeless guy stumbles out in the middle of the street and you kill him, according to the laws of B'nai Noach, it's Hive Misa. You're worthy of death. Manslaughter is worthy of death. That's very harsh. And everybody tries to pass it off as like it's a righteous thing. It's harsh. Why is it harsh? Because B'nai Noach are not under Torah. And Torah is chesed. Torah is the chesed in this world. Now, does Hashem have chesed in this world? Yes, but it is concealed. The only way to reveal the chesed and let it bubble to the top, so to speak, is through Torah. If you do not have Torah, you will not have chesed. Everything is harsh. That's why in the non-Jewish world, if people do something wrong, everything's Hive Misa, worthy of death. Hang that guy, right? And they're not doing it according to Torah. They're doing it just because they have a very not misaligned, but a very harsh sense of judgment. They have a sense of judgment, but it's very coarse. It's very unrefined. Torah is what refines this world. It's the birur. It's how to extract the kindness and the chesed that Hashem has concealed in this world. And so as a non-Jew who was not born with Torah, how do you do that? You accept the Torah. And when you do that, when you accept the seven because the Torah says so, now you're a Kabbalah of Torah. Now you have accepted the Torah, and now you are ka-ger toshav. You are like a ger toshav. That's why in all the writings, the formula for ger toshav is accepting the seven, not just accepting the seven, but accepting the seven because the Torah says so, and you do them the way the Torah prescribes them. You're careful to do them the way the Torah says so, not the way your forefathers have said so. That's called a Ben Noach, but the way the Torah describes it. And that is the difference between a Ben Noach and someone who is like a Ger Toshav. A Ger Toshav, and this is the thing. This is in the Talmud, in Makos 9a, if a ger toshav commits manslaughter, he can run to a city of refuge. He can plead his case before the court and say, hey, it was an accident. I didn't mean to do it. This is what happened. That person receives grace and hesed because they're doing things under the prescription of Torah. They have accepted Torah. They have accepted the Malchus of Hashem and his Torah. They can live in the land. A Ben Noach, however, does not run to a city of refuge. You will not find anywhere in Torah that a Ben Noach has a city of refuge. A Ben Noach is not shaykh, is not directly connected to Torah. Him, his ancestors, etc., have been loosed from being considered mitzuveh. And this is why the Ritva has, in his commentary on Makos 9a, has the commentary that there are three different Gedarim, Gimel Gedarim, three different categories of non-Jews. You have the Ger Toshav, who is Makabel, who is accepted the Torah. He is Mitzuvah Va'ose, he's commanded and does the seven. Maybe you're like that. Maybe you're like this Ger Toshav. I would venture to say that you guys are. The second type is called a Ben Noach. A Ben Noach, he does the seven, but he does the seven the way his forefathers tell him to. He doesn't do the seven because the Torah says so or because the way they're prescribed in the Torah. He might not even know what the Torah is. He's doing them because his forefathers have taught him, what his community has taught him, etc. That is called a Ben Noach, also known as Eino Mitzuveh Va'oseh, not commanded yet does. And then there's a third type of non-Jew who's called a Goy, just a Stam Goy. This is someone who is not commanded and they're not careful to do the seven. That is what a Goy is. And according to the Ritva, and also the Rebbe brings that in his famous Lukutei Sichos on Parshas Yisro, where he inaugurates his official Ben Noach campaign, trying to get Yisrael, trying to get his army of Hasidim to teach the Sheva mitzvahs to everyone. Try to get people to do the seven commandments. And if they can do them because the Torah says so, then even better. Why? Because that is like Ger Toshav. And we want to bring everyone to that level of doing the seven because the Torah says so. And this is why in all the Facebook groups and all the groups that you've been in, you always have this bifurcation of different types of Noachides, as they call themselves, and they argue about we should be doing the seven because the Torah says so. And we need to start doing how do we do the Jewish festivals and all this stuff? And then you have the other side, which is stay away from the Torah. We don't need to be doing the Torah. We just need to be keeping the seven. Leave the Jews alone type thing, right? Those are called B'nai Noach. And the problem is we have this huge group, this bastardized name called Noachide that is just basically a new religion, but they encapsulate it in a new name called Noachidism or Noachide or whatever, which is undefined. It's a way to use language to pervert the wisdom of Torah. I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose, but that's what it is. And that's why we have that bifurcation in these Noahide groups, is that there's people who want to grow in their sojourn of Torah, and then there's another half of people that say, stay away from the Torah and just do the seven. And that's why we have these two different groups. Why? Because in the Torah, there really are different types of these groups. And it's called a ger on one side, and it's just called a ben noach on the other. And so the more secular forms of these Noahides, those are the B'nai Noach. They're the wise ones of the nations, so to speak. They philosophize and they're philosophers and they just want to do the seven, but they don't care to do the seven because the Torah says so. They are the Stam, the plain Ben Noach. And then you have the group, though, that are like us, where we do care about the seven, but we care about them the way the Torah says. We are sojourning in the Torah, sojourning in the wisdom of Hashem. That is a type of ger, a type of sojourn. That is called ger toshav, if you accept the seven the way the Torah prescribes them. And then you're going to have a rabbi say, well, there's no ger toshav today. But the Torah never says that. What the Torah says is, Eino makablin ger toshav bismanazeh. There's no ger toshav that are accepted today because there's no Yovel year. And even then, they're talking about the complete ger toshav. What that means is you're not able to own a Jewish slave. I don't know anybody who's going to be trying to do that anytime soon. You know, there are way more practical things. 95, 99% of the things that apply to Ger Toshav can be applied today to non-Jews like us.
Mhm.
Um, so this Aliyah is so shaykh, so connected to us. And it's written in the Shulchan Aruch. You hear a lot that the Shulchan Aruch is just for these times, and there's no signs of Geula, the redemption in the Shulchan Aruch. It's the book for the exile and the like. But the truth is, the Shulchan Aruch talks about this gercha, your ger, and he calls him a sachir. And instead of being an eved, it's called a sachir. What's a sachir? It's a hired worker. He's doing it for some kind of reward. He's your hired servant. He comes to mow your lawn. You cannot work him basically on Shabbat. You cannot work your gercha, your sachir on Shabbat if he's at the level of Ger Toshav, basically. Now, am I saying that's actual halacha? Should we be doing that? I don't know. But I'm saying that there is definitely a venue that we should be exploring in the halacha about this issue. And what I'm talking about is in the Mishnah Berurah, on the Hafetz Haim's commentary on the Shulchan Aruch in the laws of Shabbat. He's talking about this sachir. And why is that important? Because he's applying it for today. And if he's applying those things for today, and there are people like us today that are like that Ger Toshav, then this does seem to apply. Hey, Rabbi, it's probably not a good idea to consider me a Shabbos goy. You can't be doing that. It appears to me from what this is saying, you can't be a Shabbos goy for your rabbi or whoever. You're going to have to be resting on Shabbat. If you live in a Jewish community, for instance, you should be resting on Shabbat, very similar to the way Jews are doing it. And you should not be flicking on their light switches for them and the like. But this needs to be explored and in the actual texts rather than rabbis acting like they know what it is that they're talking about and they're not exploring the text and they're still trying to poskin on it. And this is very important. People in this group are like Ger Toshav. We are not B'nai Noach. And if people want to call you that, that's fine because there's no base din for them to take you to or for you to go to. And I'm going to be doing a class on that. But so legally, they can still keep calling you a goy or a ben noach or whatever. That's fine. But is it really what's going on? And that the answer is no. And it's going to get more and more pronounced the more and more it gets swept under the rug.
Yeah, I think that is a very good point of doing it, within Torah and those doing it without outside of Torah. I don't think anybody really thinks of it in that manner. And, identifying, terminology to those who do it outside the Torah versus those who are doing it in Torah.
Yeah.
And it really explains who we are and what we're doing and the difference between people who accept the Torah and the people who are not accepting the Torah, but keeping the seven laws, But it's within what context do you keep the seven laws? Do you get to identify who you are? And
100%. A
and
Ben
that's
Noach, a Stam Ben Noach is not allowed in the land. That's what people don't understand. You have to accept the kingdom of Israel. If you do not do that, you cannot be allowed in the land. It would be like foreigners trying to come to the United States who do not accept the authority of the United States. You're not going to let them into the country on a
yeah,
legal basis.
sounds like yeah,
It's
sounds
the,
like current times.
it's the same thing. Like it's a very practical thing. Just because somebody says that they keep the seven, they have to keep it the way Israel keeps the seven. If they say, "Yeah, I keep the seven," but then they start keeping the seven like they're the country that they came from, then it's no longer like Yisrael.
Right. And I think it's important to what you're talking about. You're talking about painting painting with a wide brush, Noahide with a wide brush to where it's everybody. It's whether you keep the seven laws within the Torah or keep them outside of the Torah. It's all this one person, and in that way, it all stays convoluted. It
Yeah,
doesn't have a purpose or an identity
right.
that you're talking about. You're talking about distinct identities of a Ger and of a B'nai Noach.
And
And
that's the way the Torah teaches it. When they bastardize the term B'nai Noach, they say it's an ancestral thing, like a physical ancestral thing. No, it's a spiritual ancestral thing. And how do we know this? Is because in the Talmud it says, oh my goodness, chapter 10 of I forget the name of the tractate off the top of my head, but they call one of Adam's sons, I believe, a Ben Noach. It was well before actual Noah, well before Noah. They call him a Ben Noach. Can't be. It's a counter proof to calling all people B'nai Noach that are not Yisrael B'nai Noach. It's not a lineage. It's not a physical biological lineage. It's a spiritual category. And we Yeah. So what's the solution? Yeah. What's the solution? The solution is to not make stuff up. The solution is to actually study the Torah and see what it says. Too many Noahides, too many Noahide rabbis, etc., just make stuff up. And it's so frustrating. That's how you create a Chidush Das, a new religion. Make stuff up. How do you combat new religions and chidushim dasim? Uh, Read the Torah. What does the Torah say? What the Read the Torah so that you get the axioms right rather than just making stuff up. And so people who don't know the Torah, they get taken advantage of.
yeah, yeah, and that's where a lot of the problems I think arise from people just entering into this idea
Oh
and
yeah,
and
they're like
Torah,
sheep to the slaughter.
yeah, and Torah is being presented to them within such a broad brush. They wind up in the same place that the Christians were, in a sense of not having any identity within the Torah.
Right. It's a new religion.
Yeah.
It's just like a new religion.
I don't even, I don't even know if it's new, James. It may just be the same old religion. Just take out the she-tooth, out of it.
Right. It's not too far from the truth. It's the same function, right? It's the same
Yeah.
thing we've seen throughout human history.
You still don't have your identity and your connection to the Torah because they took that away from you. Noahide is not in the Torah. They in a sense, Noahide doesn't discourage it, but it doesn't support the connection of the seven within the Torah. And that's
Right.
really where the key problem is rabbis are not making that connection of keeping the seven within the Torah, even though they'll tell you that you have to believe it was done at Sinai and you have a portion in the world to come. Hard stop.
Right.
Nothing past that. You got your little portion in the world to come. Don't worry about anything else. This is all you got to do. And you don't have that connection with Torah, you don't have that connection with Hashem. You don't and yes, what I'm saying, it's hard to make what we were talking about earlier, to make that personal connection with the unique oneness of Hashem when you're disconnected from the Torah.
Right.
Well, I think people fall into it when they come out a Shitu.
Uh-huh.
You know, they want to do away with it, and they want to they come close to the Jews, and they're so excited that they run into and they run into the fact that of okay, I'm going to do whatever I can to help the Jews. So you get, okay, it's snowing. And so I'm gonna go clean the sidewalk on Shabbat so that they can go to the shul because they're supposed to go to the shul.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm helping the Jews, but they're not stopping to think that they're still where they were before they ever came out.
They're coming into a Shabbos Goy.
Right.
They're coming into the Shabbos Goy,
But
and they're helping the Jews because the Jews have the identity in the Torah.
Uh-huh.
And they don't have an identity in Torah, so of course they're going to run and take the snow off the steps for the Jews because they don't have an identity.
Right. So that's
That's a
one
good-
thing that we
that's a
need
good
to
analogy.
continue to work on is these people that are coming out so they don't fall into that.
Well, but that's that broad brush
Mhm.
broad brush of Noahide. It doesn't address any of these problems. It doesn't address Shabbos Goy. It doesn't address your connection with Torah.
But if they run into teachings that y'all's teachings need to be truth and or continue to be truth so that they learn from early on that's not right. Don't let them be out there for 15, 20 years, unfortunately. And then all of a sudden they find it. So see what I'm saying?
It'd be interesting to see if it becomes generational. It's not about and in America, the rabbis are really perplexed over the idea that there is no unity among the non-Jewish Torah people in America versus Africa, Philippines, different Australia, where they're all together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because they all got them at a very base introductory level, and they don't allow them to go anywhere else.
Right.
So and it's a very broad brush. It's there's no real connection to Torah. They're basically B'nai Noach, and so there's more unity because they're not allowed to expand. And so, to come, they're not allowed to connect with the Torah. They're not allowed to expand from B'nai Noach. So, what else is there? I think the rabbis are much more happy with them being in that context and a lot less problems to deal with. America, we are way too much problem.
That's right.
We have caused a lot of problems because of what we're doing here for is accessing Torah and engaging in these 7 Noahide laws from within the context of Torah. We're seeing our identity within Torah, and that it allows us to seek out the unique oneness of Hashem for and not without not without the context of within the Jewish people, by being Jewish or being within them or being their support league, as far as a Shabbos Goy.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Good stuff, James.
Yeah.
Because once you get to that level and they think that that's what they are, it's hard for you to convince them that you're not. It's hard for you to.
Yeah, if it's inside. I can tell you many stories of Shabbos Goy stories to where that that I've had people call me up and go go sneak outside and go on the phone, and they're at Shabbat over in a Jewish home of a rabbi, and they're wanting, and he goes, they're wanting me to turn on the stove. What should I do? I don't know what to say but they're in this situation to where they don't want to be a Shabbos goy, but they're doing it, and uh, and and he tells them, how can you tell them that, no, I'm not going to turn on the stove. I want to observe Shabbat. So I don't know, but
Well, they freak out. And I've had this one conversation, and a lady told me once, she goes, "Well, who's going to do it then?" I was like, "Well, you might, you need to think about that." Like,
yeah, and isn't the Shabbos Goy thing more of a European Jewish deal because of the cold weather and who's going to shovel the coal and who's going to get the snow off the steps, or who's going to help in this cold weather, where it's not so much a Sephardi deal in more arid desert type of lands or warmer climates, to where they don't need all of that type of assistance. It's only in the colder climates that this really came up. Is that a correct thought? Does that that's seems the way that I understand it, is that it was needed in the colder climates more so than it was needed in the warmer climates. How you gonna stoke the fires and keep the furnace going? Especially, and we're not talking about now, we're talking about, the 1800s. We're not talking about modern day. I don't know how they do it today, to be honest with you. Turn the heat on and it goes on and off, and I don't know. I don't understand how they work that dynamic of furnaces,
Mhm.
far as the thermostat coming on and off.
John timers.
one quick thing I want to mention. Goyim, so we mentioned the three different categories of non-Jews. A goy, which is somebody who is not commanded and they're not commanded and they don't do. They're just not careful in the seven. They don't keep Shabbat at all. They're not supposed to rest. And this is what the Talmud says, and then the Rambam reiterates that in Hilchot Malachim 10:9. And that's where people say, oh, Goyim aren't supposed to be, or non-Jews aren't supposed to be resting on Shabbat. Non-Jews aren't supposed to be studying Torah, being oisek in Torah. That's what I'm talking about. The bigger issues, like they don't understand what a goy is, and that type of non-Jew who is not careful in the seven, he's not supposed to be resting. There's work to do for that non-Jew. Like they're supposed to be studying Torah and learning the seven and growing and things like that. If you're going to live like the stars and constellations and just in the lower part of creation, then you're going to have to be a slave to those things. But there are different categories of non-Jews, and one of them is called Ger Toshav. Ger Toshav keep Shabbat like a whole Hamoed. They don't fully keep Shabbat like a Jew, but they don't not keep Shabbat like a Goy. Does that make sense? So they're like they're in between.
Sure.
They recognize Shabbat, but they still work a little bit on Shabbat, or can work, whatever you want to call it. For instance, if Pekuach Nefesh, for the salvation of a life, the saving of a life, it's permissible for a Yisrael to break Shabbat to save the life of another Yisrael. Heaven forbid a Yisrael is choking at Kiddush, and Yisrael can break Shabbat and try and help him, rush him to the hospital, whatever. However, if there's a Ger Toshav available, it's better for the Ger Toshav to break Shabbos.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out. So there's different levels. and from my perspective, my own little chidush is that, for instance, like in homesteading, we have just, we just have our little house, and I'm sure Russell, you guys did the same thing, where you guys homestead a little bit, maybe you had some animals or plants, whatever. If I don't have my ducks in a row before Shabbat, I'm going to have to work on Shabbat. I'm going to have to take care of my animals. If my barn door is open and a fox gets in there, I've got a problem. I have to make sure that I have worked throughout the week enough to prepare for the rest on Shabbat. Goyim do not prepare for that at all. So they're going to be working. And this is maybe just one explanation. I'm not saying that's what it is. Again, this is my little chidush, but
It's definitely a consciousness. It's definitely
exactly.
conscious.
And Gerim, a sojourner, is working. They are trying to prepare for Shabbat. I got to get my front door. Somebody locked themselves out. But anyway, Yisrael, on the other hand, has completely worked. They've completely done whatever it is that they need to do, right? And so they can fully rest on Shabbat. Or they should. So
Yeah, it's a Torah view, and it's how you view your Torah. It's how you view where you're at within the Torah, and who you are within it. So you have to have that Torah consciousness operating to who you are, what's going on, what you're going to do, how you're going to plan your week, how you're going to do everything. It is identifying who you are within Torah and how you plan for it and what your expectations are. And that's tied to identity. And if you don't have an identity, how can anybody do that? There is no Torah consciousness without a Torah identity.
right. And you might think you're something, but if you can't articulate it through Torah, then you're going to have a real hard time proving to others.
Yeah, it
And
is.
talking Torah.
It is equal. It is equal to proving that Jesus is not God. You can't make them. You can't make them do it. You can't get there. And they do the same thing, and it's these psychological boundaries that people build, because of and I believe it's totally rooted within identity. Is because you don't have an identity, you can't make a point, and people's not seeing your identity. People's not seeing the identity that God is not a man. They can't see that. Because obviously, well, here's this guy over here that I've been told was God.
And there's this picture that's hung on everybody's wall.
And there's he is with his blonde hair and his blue eyes. This is who he is, and because it's created an identity, and that's how powerful it is, and that's how powerful it is seeing yourself within Torah and understanding who you are within this Torah. And it allows you to have a Torah consciousness, and then that way you can have